Okay, so today's topic is Black fathers and their sons. We're going to be talking about transgenerational trauma and profound resilience. We had an alternate title, which was Singing the Song of Black Fathers, Restoration to Their Rightful Places, and/or hashtag No Longer Unsung. So one of the things that we want to do today is to make sure we all sing the song of Black fathers who are often unrecognized. And we want to bring that to the forefront of our attention for the benefit of our children, our communities, and society in general. As a reminder, this is our team. You can always go to our website to learn more about all of us. And I'm going to move on to our panelists for today. We have with us today Dr. Michael Brooks, and you may recognize him for lots of reasons. You may already be aware of him and the amazing work that he does. You may also be aware that he has helped us out previously. He has a concept paper that will come out and will be published on our website very soon. In addition, our graduate research assistant, Kimberly Bowe, will be interviewing him so that you will learn more about his opinions and his work that he does related to the topic of his upcoming concept paper. To tell you a little bit about Dr. Brooks, he is currently a professor at North Carolina A&T State University. He previously worked at the University of Florida, the University of Alabama at Birmingham, or UAB. And he has a really strong background in working with fathers, clinical work and research, as well as previously working in mental health, substance abuse, and employee assistance. So we welcome Dr. Michael Brooks today. Okay. In addition to Dr. Brooks, we will have a virtual panelist, Dr. Bantu Gross. Dr. Gross is very interested in fatherhood, education. He is a father and a husband. He serves as the director of Fathers Matter in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is where Dr. West-Olatunji is based. He collaborated with the state of Louisiana's Children's Cabinet to host its first ever statewide fatherhood conference in Louisiana and delivered the keynote address. His research and he's dedicated to working with fathers to improving the level of involvement that fathers have with their children, to get the recognition of fathers and their current level of involvement with their children. And in his leisure time, he enjoys spending time with his family and playing sports and exercising. As a quick reminder about who we are at CRESTSprogram, for those of you who are with us a lot, you already know, maybe a reminder. For those of you who are new to us, this is just going to be a quick introduction.
At the heart of CRESTSprogram is decolonized training. This is warranted in education, mental health, medicine, and parenting, to name a few. Whatever the setting, we have all been influenced by the cultural hegemony that permeates our professions. At CRESTSprogram, our courses specifically address race-based stress and promote intergenerational resilience. Our videos on demand come in various packages, including full credential programs that replace conventional coursework, individual workshops, and numerous lecture series. We also customize training programs to meet your organization's or group's needs uniquely. Now, we know that some of you are dedicated members of the CRESTSprogram community. Isn't it time to acquire some CRESTSprogram merch? Check out our online marketplace. In addition to the umbrellas, blankets, and tote bags, we offer resources to apply in your work with Black youth and other children of color. Before we forget, remember to complete the post-webinar survey. Your comments will help us enhance our programming and determine new topics for education and training. Finally, we encourage you to follow us on social media and share our posts within your social network. Thank you for your support.
So as always, we want to remind you that you have the opportunity to donate to support our work. We want to let you know that our newsletter for CREST program entitled Uplift is always available on our website. The spring issue is already on the website. The summer issue will be coming out towards the end of this week, and we will have new information there for you. We also invite you to check out our website. We have a bunch of new features there. I've already talked a little bit about the staff-generated videos. We have a new blog, so you can check out the first 3 posts that are there. And we're also going to talk to you about upcoming trainings. So the first training that we want to make sure that you know about is this summer. It's going to be in July. It's July 12th in New Orleans, Louisiana. It's being offered in conjunction with the Xavier University Center for Equity, Justice, and the Human Spirit, of which Dr. West-Olatunji is a director. It is for people who are involved or in emancipatory research. Typically, a lot of the individuals who attend this event have already gone through our CREST Liberate credential program that is available on our site. But we invite you to do that. You can always go through that training and also attend the in-person Emancipatory Research Symposium in New Orleans. In terms of our upcoming training events, internal training events, we will be taking a break this summer, so we will not have any webinars in the months of July and August, but we'll start back up in September. We'll hit the ground running by talking about colorism and the impact of colorism on Black youth. And then October, we'll return to grief, and Dr. Ebony White, the newest member of our team, will be responsible for that webinar. She'll be sharing her expertise in that area. In November, we'll be focusing on the neuroscience of trauma, and we're planning on having a new research fellow, an additional research fellow, who will be presenting. And in December, as always, we're going to have part 4, which is infusing culture into holiday celebrations. For those of you who have attended in the past, you know what it's all about. And anyone who's new, it's a great way to think about infusing African-American and African history and culture into your holiday events. All right, so our topic for the day again is Black fathers and their sons, transgenerational trauma and profound resilience. We have 3 learning objectives for today. We want to enhance your knowledge about the facts versus the stereotypes about Black fathers and their parenting practices, with an emphasis on caregiving related to sons. 2, we want to increase your awareness about the impact of stereotype threat on the parenting practices and well-being of Black fathers. And last, as always, we want to expand your skill set to include culture-centered, trauma-informed interventions that are most effective with Black fathers. What we want to do is to start off this section of the presentation, just going over some common stereotypes about Black fathers, and then compare that or contrast that with what the research indicates is true about Black fathers. So 2 common stereotypes about Black fathers are that they're either absent or uninvolved with their children, or considered to be what is termed to be a deadbeat father. So what do we mean by that? Absent meaning they are either uninvolved in their children's lives or uninvolved in caregiving related duties. So there are lots of stories about children not having any contact with their fathers for long periods of time. Black children not having contact with their fathers for long periods of time, and also about Black fathers not paying their fair share of their child support. So those are things that are typically talked about in terms of, perceptions of Black fatherhood. But when we look at the research, what do we know? So one is, if we look at fathers who live in the same household with their children, biological children, Black fathers have actually been demonstrated to be more likely to feed and or eat with their children, meaning about 78, let's say that almost 80%, compared to 74% for white fathers and 64% for Hispanic fathers. Black fathers are actually, when they live in the same household with their children, are more likely to bathe, dress, and or help with toileting every day. That's 70% compared to 60% or 45% compared to their white or Latinx counterparts. When fathers live apart or live in a different household from their biological children, Black fathers are actually more likely to spend time with their biological children at least monthly, and more likely to talk to their children at least several times per week about their day, about half, compared to 30% for white fathers and 20% for Hispanic fathers. And this is when fathers are reporting their level of interaction and involvement with their children, and also when mothers are reporting fathers' levels of interaction and involvement. So let's go to some questions, and then we'll have a chance for you to interact with us via the chat. So we're going to get started by asking, I'm going to do this. I am going to stop my share at this point because we want to go ahead. We've introduced Dr. Michael Brooks, but what we want to do is give him a chance to weigh in. So there are some questions that we had we want to go ahead and ask. So the first question is about, we just talked about some of the stereotypes of Black fathers and what the data indicates, both when fathers report their actual level of involvement and when mothers report fathers' involvement levels. There's a very big difference between the stereotypes and reality. So the first question is, what are some of the factors that really have contributed to the establishment and the maintenance of these stereotypes about Black fathers when the truth is very different?
Yeah. Good afternoon, and thank you again for the opportunity to share my thoughts. Dr. White, I cannot ignore the Boston hat. Congratulations on the NBA championship. First things first, right? So I can't help but genuflect over the previous slide and identify with some of those stereotypes, either as things that I've heard or things that I've actually lived. And the one instant that comes to mind is the involvement in the lives of children. I have two daughters, ages 9 and 12. I live in a household of 3 Black women, my daughters included, and my wife. And my wife works, and my children go to public schools. I think I just say all that to have context. But when my children were babies, I think I picked one up and said, I'm going to go change her. And I remember my uncle, who is now 80, looked at me and said, "You change diapers?" And I said, it kind of caught me off guard, and I kind of said, "Well, who doesn't change diapers?" I said that to myself. I said, "Yeah, I change diapers. I change diapers a lot." And he's looked at me dead in the eye and said, "I've never changed a diaper in my life." And my uncle has 4 children, and my uncle is, or was, still is, a very involved father. So I think when I think about factors, it's information versus misinformation, perceptions versus misperceptions, roles versus stereotypes. It was his role to do certain activities, and changing diapers was not a part of his role. It did not mean he was a uninvolved father. It just meant that wasn't his role. So I think you can be a very involved father. I think in some ways, if you are misinformed or you misperceive, you can see a behavior and think that is promoting or validating a stereotype, when in fact, it may not just be the role. It may not be, or it may not be the role for the house. I've learned I cook in my house, which I think is counterculture or counter narrative to a stereotype. I am the cook in the house, very proudly. The women and daughters' wife will tell you, if you want good food, you come to me. And that's not to say my wife's food is not good, but mine is consistently good. I'll say it like that. But I think the stereotype is men don't cook or men aren't involved in the kitchen. But I think it's, what is your forte? And I enjoy it, but my wife has a role too. if you can't cook, you go to the grocery store. If you can't cook, you clean the kitchen. If you can't cook, there are other things. So I just think, like stereotypes, they're impermeable to logic. Um, so I think if there is a follow-up question to some stereotypical observations, then I think you will see that what the reality is what's best to help the household work and function.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, so that's one of the challenges when you say stereotypes are impermeable to uh, reality facts. That's a situation. The other thing is that we need to see those images. And I think that a lot of times that those are not the images that we see. And other times there are things that are in plain view, and yet, for whatever reason, it's hard for us to recognize it. I think about even on my street, if I think about from my street from here into the beginning of the subdivision, there are a lot of fathers here who are either single fathers or very involved dads. In general, when I know that there's, I think, 1.5 million Black single fathers, and yet there aren't a lot of images and stories about them. And I don't think that they get enough recognition, and which means also that their needs are often unmet. And so I think it is about being out here and changing the narrative about who Black fathers really are, so that it reflects reality. And also, if we want to help those dads who are struggling, they need to have good models of what it looks like to be super involved dads. And if they think it's unmanly or uncommon or unusual, as opposed to more standard and typical, and that's something to aim to achieve as a goal, and I think that they can step up to the plate as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, as some of you know, I'm not a big techie person. Typically, Dr. West-Olatunji is the one who handles all of this. So bear with me as I do some things that we're not used to doing. So we actually recorded a video of Dr. West-Olatunji, who's actually here today, but behind the scenes. She's typically front and center. So we did record her interview with our other guest panelist, Dr. Gross. And we have a video of him answering the same question. So I am going to try to share that with you. Okay, so I'm going to go here and I'm going to go ahead and see if we can play that video.
I think I typically kind of go back to like media and what's represented, the portrayals that we see on TV of Black males that just tie into all these other ways that we conduct research or think about research when we're actually in practice with Black males in particular. I think sometimes people are just, their biases are just showing whenever we think about Black males. And so the idea that a Black male could be gentle with their child, could be knowledgeable about what their child is doing, what school they go to and whatnot. I know from some of the guys that I've worked with directly, like they know their kid's social security number. They know when their kid needs to go to the doctor. They know the doctor's name. They've been to the prenatal, postnatal appointments. Like they're very engaged and very active. And despite all that, it's almost like they're viewed as a dodo bird. Like, oh, wow, I thought you guys were extinct. And the guys are like, no, we're here and we're doing the job. We're just not being acknowledged. And so I even know for my own self and some of the research that I have done. I remember doing a poster presentation at a national conference, and I was talking about fatherhood. And one of the first questions I got was, but what about the bad dads? And so, I kind of interrogated the young lady a little bit because I got a counseling background. And so turns out she had, some daddy issues. And so she kind of came from it with that frame, the idea that, I hear you uplifting, positive Black fatherhood figures. But what about, the bad dad I had and how he hurt me and how he damaged me? And this idea that because I was damaged by this one guy, all of them are bad, and just label them all in that same picture.
Wow. So what do you think those stereotypes, what effect do you think those stereotypes have on Black fathers or Black men who are fathering children?
Yeah, I think it causes us at times to position ourselves and contort ourselves at times to show that we're not bad, that we're good. It causes us to change the tone of our voice when we're in certain rooms with people, or how we're even holding our children. Because if we raise our voice, is someone going to say he's abusing the kid? And so like all these different things. And then there's some guys who it's just a difficult hill to climb, to get over for them. And so they may, regress, or they may say, you know what, I'm gonna let mom do it when we're in public settings, because I don't want anyone to think differently of me, or to think that something is going on. So I think it messes with the psyche in some ways. But then I also know a bunch of guys who are kind of like, so what? Let them think what they want to think. Like, I know who I am. I'm a Black dad. I'm proud of it. I know for myself. I have 4 kids now, but when I had just 2, on Saturdays I would take them to the library so my wife could go to dance, because she was part of this dance class. So she would go dance, and Saturday was with me and the kids. I would cook pancakes. She would eat pancakes with the family. She would go dance. I'd get the kids, put them in a red wagon, and we'll walk to the library to do story time. After story time, I'll walk them to the park, have them some playtime. Then I'll walk them home with the wagon and give them the nap. And then by that time, my wife is coming home. She's able to shower, take her nap, eat some lunch, and everything is fine. But even doing that, it was kind of like there was a studio audience, because it was like, oh, wow, look at this Black dad, like this clapping, this whole parade. But it's also like Black moms do this, white moms, Asian moms, etc. do this, and no one, bats an eye. But a Black dad does it, and it's like, wow, it's kind of like when some people would say like, wow, you're so articulate for a Black man. It's like, oh, wow, you're so dad for a Black man. Like, it's something that's just out the norm for people to see.
Okay. So now we'd like to have an activity for all of you. You've learned a lot. We've shared some data. We've had both Dr. Brooks and Dr. Gross weigh in on some of the questions that we had. So we'd like you to take some time now to just reflect and use the chat feature in Zoom to just share 1 or 2 words that capture your reactions. It could be thoughts, it could be feelings, to the facts that we've shared, or the topics or comments that have been made by the panelists about Black fathers.
So Dr. West, maybe while people are answering in the chat, there's a question in the Q. Oh, there was a question in the Q&A that was answered, but it might be interesting to hear our panelists answer the question too. Would that work out?
Sure.
How do you
So before you do that, I just want to take a look at some of the comments that people are making in the chat. So 1 or 2 words. Oh, okay. All right, so I'm seeing informational and impactful. I'm seeing comments about stereotypes being deceitful. Yeah, people are commenting about the media, etc. Yes, so Kimberly, I think that's a really good point. So before we have our panelists talk about or answer the question that was posted, I'd like to get Dr. Brooks to weigh in on the second question. So Dr. Gross has already answered the second question. But the second question was really about how these stereotypes affect Black fathers and their parenting practices. So Dr. Brooks, if you want to weigh in on that, and then we can answer the question that Kimberly's identified from.
Yes, sure. So I think I kind of touched on how the stereotype affected my fathering, and I want to kind of say something kind of in relation to what Dr. Gross hinted at. I was fortunate enough to become a father when I wanted to be a father. Like I was enthused about it. I didn't become a father by happenstance or by accident or by whatever. My wife and I sat down. We had a planned parenthood, if you will. Um, and I was at a point in my life where I was able to have a steady job. Fortunately, I worked in the counseling profession, so I'm aware of human development. So I recognize that there's some privileges here that maybe others don't have. And I embraced that, but that was also putting me in an interesting position to speak differently to other narratives. Why don't I do? Isn't there more of, wow, kind of like what Dr. Gross said, you're so involved about being a dad, which kind of had me looking like, the Scooby-Doo face, like, oh. So I think that's important to just mention. I think all of those examples speak to how I experience um, these stereotypes and still experiencing them today. But I also think stress is not a stereotype, but stress affects Black fathers and Black men tremendously, which also affects how we parent and how we deal with work and work stress. Um, I think the best way I deal with stress, though, is by always exposing my children to the gray areas of life. So I'm a college professor. I think rather than talk to my children about college, I just take them on every campus we go to. But not just for intentional purposes. We go there just to sit, but we also go to homecomings. We go to games, and I just want them to get comfortable being in these spaces. When we eat food, we try to make the palate as diverse as possible, but we still do cultural foods too, black eyed peas and rice, um, and whatever else comes with that. Hey, try something you don't know. We also do a lot of things in music, just everything that's cultural, and we just have conversations around that and talk about differences and similarities. I think that's the biggest way to just bulldoze stereotypes, liberate my kids' minds. Um, just liberate the minds as much as we can. And even as I say that, and I see that in the chat, someone said, "Thank you for recognizing it's a privilege." These are privileges that everyone doesn't get a chance to experience. My mother taught me, and just for the record, I was raised in a single parent household. Um, my mother taught me that to be able to think about the future is a privilege. And that's probably one of the biggest ones that I know I have and that I don't take for granted.
Absolutely. I think that all of those comments are really awesome. I mean, in terms of exposing your children to different experiences as a way of dealing with stress and to show them expectations. I remember once I was in a dance troupe when I was growing up, and it was called Kuumba. It was in Buffalo, New York. And I remember, the teenagers had to take care of the children, the Watatos. And I remember my day, we were having a performance and the children came in, this little girl came in, her hair was so adorable. It was by far the cutest hairstyle. And she had all these bows and ribbons and it was all kinds of stuff going on. And I'm a hair person, so I was thinking, wow, that's pretty complicated. And I remember asking her, she's like 3, and I said, "Who did your hair?" And she said, "My daddy did my hair." And I was like, "Oh, you mean your mom?" Because I'm thinking, I don't know any dads, let alone Black dads, who could do all the, I don't know, she had everything, every ribbon and bow and, the bobs that you put on the end. And so she was swinging her hair. It was just a lot going on. And I was like, "You mean your mom?" She goes, "No, my daddy." And I was like, "Poor baby. She doesn't know her mom, but her dad, yeah." And then when her dad came to get her, I was like, "Oh, here she is." And I'm like, "Her hair is so cute." And I'm like, "She said you did her hair." He goes, "I did." And I went, "What?" And that happened like when I was probably like, I don't know, 12 or 13. And it just blew my mind because my dad was very involved. He did all the cooking big time. He was a construction worker and he did the cooking and he did baking. And he was just like all into that. Right. So I was very accustomed to fathers doing virtually everything, but hair, no, I can't imagine my dad. Even to this day, I can't imagine him. But I'm sure if mom wasn't around, he'd have to do my hair because he wanted his baby girl to look a certain way. And you require those skills. And I also went to a hair show and I saw they had this competition for dads on Father's Day for dads doing little girls' hair. And they were rocking it. And it was like, wow, that's more of them about everybody being so excited about it. But it's really just a normal thing in plenty of children's households. The dad does hair. And so I think seeing these images of Black men being super macho in certain settings, but also being very involved doing the things that need to be done in the household to take care of their children. So it isn't like, as you all said, being a dodo bird or, having to have these sort of Scooby-Doo moments where you feel like, what are you talking about? It's like, that's just normal. It's a normal thing for Black fathers to do. And if you haven't seen it, then you need to get exposed. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
And you mentioned machoism, and I don't think we can talk about Black fathers and not talk about masculinity. I think at some point we have to reestablish that being masculine is a fluid concept, and one's masculinity isn't threatened because they choose to father in a way that's non-traditional. And I think it's also ironic that you spoke about your father, and you are a female, and I'm a father of daughters. And if you're going to be a father of daughters, you're going to have to do some things that may not traditionally align with what you've done. So you're going to do hair, and you're gonna pick out dresses, and you're going to talk about menstruation, and a host of other things. These are going to be common topics. And I think you kind of have to ask yourself, do you want to be involved or not? Do you want to parent or not? Do you want to be a dad or not? And I've kind of taken on the position when I was much younger in my parenting. I should be able to parent my child independent of my wife, and vice versa. I should not say, the household should not come to an abrupt halt because someone had to go on a 2-day work trip. The nutritional values of the kids should not take a hiatus because a parent is gone. The clothes still need to be clean. They're just things that you're going to have to grow up and do if you want to be an involved parent. And I think conceptually, though, that has to digest before it can be put into action.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Kimberly, I know you said there was a question. What's the question?
Oh, sorry, get myself off mute here. How do you deal with people thinking a Black father is not involved due to being a deadbeat dad when he really just passed away?
Wow.
And I may need you to repeat that. I heard deadbeat dad and competing with Black father.
My apologies. I tend to speak really fast. I apologize. How do you deal with people thinking a Black father is not involved due to being a deadbeat dad when he really just passed away?
I think that's an unfair question. Yeah, that's slippery. I assume that when the father was alive, the father wasn't deadbeat. So the short answer is, I don't think we have to prove anything to anyone. And I think part of the remedy is to stop feeling like you have to prove something to someone. You know, there's an old spiritual, let my work speak for me. And I think we need more of that. People can say what they want to say about Michael Brooks. Um, I Dr. West-Olatunji knows Woodrow Max Parker, and I often tell the story about student evaluations and what did students say about me and my teaching. And I asked Max about that after Max retired from the University of Florida. And he said, Brooks, I have 28 years of student evaluations in my office that I never opened. And I said, why not? He said, I do the best I can and I let the chips fall where they may. And I think, there's truth in that. Do the best you can. Try to be as informed as you can. Genuflect on your mistakes. and try to do better. But if you start listening to the noise, I think you become somewhat controlled by that.
A really good point like that. Let my work speak for me is one. Unfortunately, sometimes even when your work is amazing, it's still nobody's listening and speaking, but people aren't listening. So that can be a real challenge. As someone whose father passed away right before I graduated from college, my mom was obviously there, but my dad wasn't there. And he probably couldn't have been there because he had a lot of health issues. He had some physical disabilities. So he probably wouldn't have been there anyway. And yeah, it would be very hurtful for people to assume that my dad wasn't present because he's a stereotypical Black dad or dad in general. That would be very hurtful. It is tempting to want to shout, as loud as you can, that my dad is very involved in. How dare you make that assumption? He's not here because he can't be here, right? But it really is about each person. It could be a matter of being like, well, I can say it as many times as I want to. It may not change your perception of Black fathers in general. And I don't have to necessarily answer to you. It's up to the person to decide if they want to explain it or leave people where they are, because if people have that perception, sometimes facts don't make much of a difference. But yeah, it's hurtful. It's very hurtful. And I've certainly had clients who felt that same way, who had a mom that I saw in therapy who had 4 children, and the father had passed away. He was a very involved father, but he passed away. And she said that people would look at her with 4 kids and without a father in the home and assume that she'd never been married, assume that the father is just this person out there who was uninvolved and didn't care. And the children talked about that as well, that people made that assumption, which was incorrect. Even if it were true, it was still pretty hurtful to think you know someone's story and to be insensitive to people's feelings. And so, again, it is a matter of being able to talk to children and talk to ourselves about and get help if we need professional help, support family members, friends, or professional help to deal with what it feels like for people to think you're a walking stereotype, which is oftentimes, we spend our time trying not to be what people automatically think of us anyway, and still find yourself there. Facing those situations is really difficult. So that goes to the stress and the trauma associated with people's perceptions of you or your group of people, and what that means in terms of understanding who you actually are, what your situation actually is. And even if that is your situation, that your father was uninvolved, what does that say about you? It doesn't say anything about you not being lovable or being worthy or being deserving or being wonderful and amazing. It just says something about someone else and where they are on their journey. So helping children to understand that, helping ourselves as grown adults who used to be children who have to deal with some of those tough situations is super important. And I'm glad that we're able to talk about some of those things here today. Okay, good question. Difficult question. I don't know who asked that question, but it was a really good one, and one that we're really glad that you shared. Okay. All right. Well, in some ways, we have moved right along. I'm going to share again my screen, and I am going to move forward. So people have shared 1 or 2 words, lots were shared. We appreciate that. Okay, so more information. So caregiving among Black fathers. So people may have already been aware of this, but if you're new to this, in general, fathers of sons are more likely to remain in relationships and marriages than fathers of daughters. That's independent of race or ethnicity. But what the research has indicated in terms of Black fathers of sons report higher levels of engagement in caregiving, visiting, and physical play than Black fathers of daughters, and even more so than what we see in white and Latinx fathers. In addition, Black fathers of sons engaged in higher levels of caregiving compared to white or Latinx fathers. So that's the data. Let's move on to questions and answers. So before we share the video by Dr. Gross, I'm going to ask this question for Dr. Brooks, but also our other members of the panel. So question number 3 is, can you give us some examples of Black fathers demonstrating resilience? Just in general, in terms of dealing with various stereotypes about them, or just as Black fathers going through the struggle of being Black men in America, being Black fathers of children, dealing with how the world perceives them versus their own reality. And as you talked about, dealing with what it means to be a father and accepting all aspects of fatherhood.
Yeah, I think there are a ton of examples that I could draw on. The easiest and probably also the most emotional, distressing was the murder of George Floyd, and not so much the murder, but the aftermath, and just what was it like to exist, and have people look at me, um, and the stress that also comes along with that. Um, and what does that mean, Michael? What are you trying to say? So, Daddy, are we safe from the police? Daddy, are we safe in our neighborhoods? Daddy, who will protect us? Daddy, even with the unreadiness with the election of Donald Trump, Daddy, there are people saying things. What's this going to mean for us? All of those, and they may not be stereotypes. They may just be realities in some ways. But how do we deal with them? Kind of was a test of resilience. How can we look past these circumstances? That I think that's what I was forced to do. Look at these problems and even see positives within these negatives. Sweetie, this is why we vote. Sweetie, this is why we get involved. Sweetie, we are safe, and let me tell you how we're safe. When we go through the list of those things, I brought up Floyd and I brought up Donald Trump, but I also need to bring up living through the pandemic and all those things happening at the same time. I had to become the school teacher, the principal, the cafeteria worker, all in the same household, and still do my job live from this location. So those are just ongoing countless examples of resiliency that we just had to push through. And we didn't do it well. Let me say that up front. We did not come out of the pandemic. If you think we're out of it, I say that with carefully. But we didn't come out of that unscathed. We came out bruised and battle tested. But we can look back on that as a learning experience. We can look back on that and say, remember when? And it's a place to ground ourselves as a family.
Absolutely. I think that, whether we're out of it or not, I think we're still dealing with the aftermath. And I think that's something that is not always recognized. I think it's painful to think about what we've all been through. And even though there are some positives that have occurred as a result of the pandemic and all of the focus on the incidents of police brutality, there's a lot of trauma associated with that for all of us. And especially for communities of color, because we were disproportionately impacted by all of these things, right? And so to feel unsafe in terms of our medical status and being unsafe just to walk on the streets, being a Black person walking through America, and being unsafe thinking about where's the country going? What does that mean if we're going to make it great again? It wasn't great for us then. And so if we're heading in that direction, what does that mean for us as a people? What does that mean for us as individuals? And so I think in terms of thinking about all of that is, yes, it's profound resilience to have survived all of that and to be able to have meaningful conversations with your children, our children, about what does that mean. And it is scary. It's a scary time. Has been scary to share that it is scary, but that we're all doing the best that we can to make it as safe, all of us as safe as possible without, scaring the children, but also giving them a dose of realism. It's really difficult. It's a hard, my mother used to say, it's a hard road to hoe. It's a hard line to find. You don't want to scare the children, but you want to prepare them for reality, right? You don't want them to be demoralized and feel like they're giving up. On the other hand, they have to be prepared for what they may experience. So figuring out, at what level do you share developmentally, and also in terms of, the child's capacity and your own capacity to even talk about what's happening. I call it sometimes the blind leading the blind. It's like, we are here. If you're already afraid and worried and scared, you're trying to assure children not to feel that way. It's a real challenge, and trying to find meaning. What does this mean for me? What does it mean for us as a family? What does it mean for us as a people? Those are really hard questions to deal with, and let alone try to share with children who have a limited capacity to really truly understand, but still have a right to have their questions answered. Yeah. Dr. White wants to weigh in. Go ahead. Feel free.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be brief. I know we have to keep going, but Dr. Brooks was speaking to this and other people commented on these things. And then I'm thinking about the last comment that Dr. Westow put in the chat in regards to decolonizing our mind. And so we know that racism is a powerful force. And although we live in a patriarchal society, our Black men don't get to fully get the benefits of the patriarchy, right or wrong. And so I think about how the competing messages about what it means to be a man in this society, and how that can sometimes get conflated with or impede what it means to be a father as well in society, right? And so clinically working with men and them feeling like I can't stand before my children while I'm this way, right? And so feeling like they have to have the full evidence of their manhood, whatever that means, before they can be present in their children's lives, or even not even just fully present, but the way they show up and the parts of themselves that they are allowing their families to see. And so I don't think that the impact of white supremacy can be understated, and how it impacts how our Black men are not just able to parent, right? How they are available or accessible, or how they are criminalized, or how they're, all of these things impact the way that they can show up as fathers. So I just wanted to lean in a little bit to that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, well, I'm gonna take a chance and move forward to, okay, we always go to, what can I do today? Right. So we often get asked, if I'm a teacher, I'm a parent, I'm a clinician, and I'm a juvenile justice professional. Based upon what we just talked about, what I've learned today, what can I do today to promote resilience in Black fathers as they deal with stereotype threat and all the other issues that we just talked about? How could we answer that question? What can they do today?
Yeah, today, right now.
Yeah.
Develop an asset-based approach. Ivory Tolson has a book called No More BS, No More Bad Stats. And he said, and I'm just going to paraphrase, he said he will not reflect Black people in a way that is negative. I would go a step further and say I would call out any type of promotion of Black people, inclusive of Black fathers, in a negative format. Why are there so many Black men in jails, as opposed to what are some of the factors that contribute to Black men staying out of jail? Just the simple reframe is not only an act in social justice, but it also pivots the mind to think about positive narratives. In addition to these narratives, I would highlight them. I would call them success stories. I would promote them. I would speak to them everywhere. That's one thing. I think secondly, community engagement. Get knee deep in the weeds with people. Learn real stories as opposed to reading about them or reading someone else's opinion or someone else's idea of community. Go put your hands on the community. Go put your hands on the people. If they don't exist, go put your hands on the artifacts, read their words, hear their words. Mentor, and I don't necessarily mean mentoring for the sake of providing a guiding light for someone, but just to establish a relationship with people who are in the community and share in the responsibility. I'll stop at the last one. I'll try to combine them. Maybe like some type of advocacy that addresses media representation. One, advocate, speak up, speak out, speak loud, or just speak up, speak out. And even if you don't want to speak loud, I think eventually people will hear you if you continue to say these words. But address the media representation, address how groups are portrayed, and also if the group is being misrepresented, bring attention to that's a example, that's not all. That is a piece, that's not the whole pie. And if you're going to advocate, then ask questions. Why are there no more images of these people in this space? We need more examples of this. You know, one of the great aspects of the Cosby Show, and I know I'm dating myself, is that was the only positive image that we saw of Black fathers, Black families, and Black people from the prime news, prime viewing hours. I think if you remove the Cosby Show in that period, the only images you saw of Black people were of servant workers, inmates, and criminals. And we can all attest that there's more to Black folks than that. So in your advocacy, address the media representation and challenge the negative portrayals. I'll stop there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've definitely had clients who have said maybe they didn't have an experience where they had a good role model for, involved fathers. And they said, well, okay, I knew I wanted to be different. And I've had clients who said, I did use the Cosby Show. Unfortunately, that is an issue now. But for me, it was a good time seeing the father there, John Amos, playing that role, and how much he loved his wife and how he was involved. No matter how they struggled, he obviously cared. And it was like the way he felt about his little baby girl and everything. I just loved that because it made me think about, okay, this is this example. The show Rock, do you remember that? They showed this, yeah, and then his father lived in the household. So you get to see him and his two boys, and then you see Rock and his wife, just their relationship. So you get to see those things, but that's pretty rare. And I remember thinking, oh, I really crave that. I need to see that, because that was some example of what I could see on TV that modeled what I had seen growing up, right? I'm going to say it's creating a safe space to talk about. So sometimes it's hard when people are talking about their own situation, either they're frustrated about, their children's fathers not doing something, or about their own father, so their own trauma, like Dr. Gross talked about. It's hard to say, well, that wasn't my experience, right? So creating a safe space to say, yeah, these are some examples of dads not standing up and doing what they need to do. But let's talk about those dads who did. Like, does anybody have a story? Sometimes nobody wants to hear that story, because it means that what does that mean about you, that you ended up having the situation, right? And so it's all about the trauma that people have gone through, and their own situation makes it hard to hear the positive stories, right? And so we end up having a whole long discussion about which fathers don't do what they're supposed to do, and not having a place to say, well, actually, now that we kind of talked about those, does anybody have an example? Give people a place to be able to talk about that without feeling like it's making someone feel bad or anything like that. The other thing is to don't assume that there is no father. I can't tell you how many times I've been working. For example, I worked at the juvenile court in Fulton County for 8.5 years. I remember sitting around the table and we're all talking, and mom's there. There's always a mom who's there, and the assumption is there's not a dad. And it's like, there is a dad. There is a dad or father figure somewhere, right? It's her boyfriend or the child's actual father, grandfather, whoever. And it's like, it might even be, oh, who dropped you off? They're like, my dad. Your dad dropped you off? Why isn't dad in here? Like, he's missed all the meetings. It's this thing of when we've identified who are the key important individuals in a child's life, we're overlooking the fathers who are actually present. And even though the mom might say to you, oh, he's not going to come, it's like, give me that number. Let me call him. Because when I reach out, the fathers come. I can't tell you, it's been very rare that a father did not come. So it's this thing of, no, not through you. You don't have to ask him. You can give me his number and I will ask him. And I can tell you right now, the power of Black men in any space, educational space, mental health space, a court space. When I worked in the Fulton County Juvenile Court, I would just ask a father, a Black man, just a Black man, to walk through the suite. I don't even need you to say anything. Don't say anything to anybody. Just walk through my suite. Just walk through, come in the front door and go out the back door. And when they did that, I can tell you, it made a difference in the children, right? Kids who were acting out, maybe on the floor, and won't get up, whatever, would get up. You know, they sit up straighter. They carry themselves different. I remember growing up, it was like that. It was Mr. Mackey in our neighborhood, right? When Mr. Mackey walked down the street, oh, the boys pulled up their pants, they adjusted their hat. Hi, Mr. Mackey, blah, 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 because he didn't tolerate any kind of foolishness. Just the look on his face, whether he gave approval or disapproval, right, was important to the boys in the community. Even the toughest boys wanted Mr. Mackey's approval or didn't want his disapproval, right? And so it makes a big difference. And I think that Black men and Black fathers are underutilized resource in the school setting, in the mental health setting, in the juvenile justice setting in general, in terms of making a difference in the lives of children and our society as a whole. All right, well, we are moving right along. I am thinking about where we want to go with this point. I'm going to say that we've touched on a lot of different things. I'm going to go and share my screen and move us along. All right, so that was session number 2. Let's give Dr. Gross a chance to weigh in on these topics. I'm going to go ahead and...
Yeah, I think, so one of the things I think about at times is, I think, at least for myself at times, whenever I feel like I'm in a situation where it's like, okay, like I feel overwhelmed or whatever like that, I kind of place myself as if I'm a superhero or I'm a super athlete in some type of sport. And it's like, it's time for me to step up. It's the fourth quarter and whatnot. And so I think some of my brothers do the same thing as well. It's kind of like, okay, this is my moment to shine. It's time for me to step up. And I'm not going to be beat down. Like, I'm about to show that I can do this in any environment. Because I think, you know, we kind of tap into, you know, that ego a little bit. Like, you know, we're better than this, or you're not going to hold me down. And so we just kind of step up to the plate, and whatever that looks like, you know, we're willing to do because we love our kids. And I think that's something that's often overlooked and not noted enough. For instance, I was watching this documentary called Daughters, and a really great documentary. It'll drop on Netflix on August 14th. But in short, I don't get any proceeds from it. So I'll just put that out there. But anyway, so in the movie, it's about these prisoners, inmates. They have daughters on the outside, and they're no longer connected to their daughters. And the daughters want to have a daddy-daughter dance. And so they're like, it can't happen. And so one of the daughters says, well, we're going to bring it to them. So they actually enter the prison facility. They organize the dance, they dance. And so what was so beautiful about it was the inmates got to wear suits. And the daughters came in with their nice dresses and their hair done and all this other fun stuff. And they dance and they smile. But then when they leave, you see all the crying because the dads are like, my daughter's leaving. And the daughters are crying because daddy is gone. And so it's, and I bring it up to say that no one sees that side often enough of like dads crying to be with their children, children crying to be with their dads, and how they want to be attached. They don't want to be detached from dads. And so oftentimes it's this negative view, this negative perception that Black dads or dads in general at times are not on the same platform or equal footing as moms when it comes to being a parent. I know for my own self, at the daycare my kids go to, my kids been going there for 8 years. My youngest one is there now. And so one of the daycare workers, I'm not going to name her name because I love her. She's a great person. So one day I'll go there. And so she says, you know, hey, Bantu, don't forget to tell mom that baby needs milk. And I'm looking at her like, I've been coming here 8 years. Like, just tell me, I'll bring the milk. So I was like, yes, ma'am. I'll tell my wife that the baby needs milk, as if it's like, come on now. I've been here 8 years. Like, you know my name. You know what I'm capable of doing. But why is it that someone that I've built this relationship with over these years still looks to mom and not to me? Even though I'm dead in her face, she's seen me show up for my kids, pick them up, bring diapers, bring all these things. But even in her eyes, it's like, you're still not quite yet mom. And I think that's something to where it's like, okay, like, I don't know what else I got to do to show this lady that I'm showing up for my kids other than being present, being there, and being myself. And when I get there, like, the kids are running to see me, and it's like, I know you see this, but it is what it is. So yeah, so some things just die hard, and some images that people have. I remember one time a friend of mine was talking about, we have these records in our head, and it just stays on that same groove, playing the same song over and over again. And so some people just don't want to turn off that record and leave it on repeat.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna skip this for now. I'm gonna move on to some resources for Black fathers. We give you some information. We have some crisis lines in case that's needed. There are some resources in terms of helping Black men and Black fathers access mental health resources that would be specifically with individuals who are either trained or actually trained to work with Black fathers, or maybe people who are people of color who are therapists. So that's Black Men Heal and Therapy for BlackMen.org. And then there are a number of other organizations that really focus on Black fathers. And so there are some here that we're going to provide, and we're going to put that information in the chat. We've already answered some questions. So what I want to do is I'm going to stop here, stop sharing, and see if there are other questions that we need to answer from participants. So, Kimberly, guide us through that.
All right, so Dr. West-Olatunji has been doing a great job answering questions in the Q&A. Let's see if there's some we could answer live as well. So Dr. West-Olatunji gave a resource for this as well. Is there research on LGBTQ Black dads and their involvement with their children? I'm curious if there are any differences.
That is a really good question.
I will say my good friend, Dr. Michael Hannon, and I'm sure Dr. Brooks knows about this, he has a book about Black fathers fathering, and it's from the perspectives of different Black father voices. And there are some fathers who are gay or in married relationships with other men, and they really account for their stories as well. I know Dr. Butler is in the audience today. I know he has a narrative in that book as well. And so what I can do is post the link to that book in the chat.
From a clinical standpoint, I've had clients who were gay men, and they had lots of concerns about how people perceive them as being single fathers and what they could and could not do. They were concerned about their small child wanting to sleep in the same bed with them and feeling as though they can't let them do that because of people's perceptions about, or misperceptions about, gay men being synonymous with being a pedophile, right? And so there are a lot of perceptions, I'm sure, that is on top of that. So we think about intersectionality, thinking about, okay, what is it like to be a Black male? What is it like to be a Black father? And then what's it like to be a Black gay father? Parenting boys can be challenging as well. And I've also had youth who had gay fathers who felt as though they didn't feel as though their fathers could give them the appropriate example of how to establish a romantic or sexual relationship because of the differences. And so there could be some disconnects. There are some wonderful examples of resiliency in those areas as well, how to overcome some of those challenges. But definitely there's a whole nother level of challenges and stereotypes that have to be overcome. Does anyone else want to weigh in on that topic? Okay. All right.
All right, so there's one that just came into the chat specifically for Dr. Brooks. Dr. Brooks, how do you deal with women that gatekeep?
Yeah, and Dr. West, I saw that one pop up, so I was holding fast since they called one out just for me. How do I deal with women that gatekeep? And I would just kind of paraphrase and say women that may control access to something and keep me from it. I'm trying to think of when I've been kept out of the gate. Usually I call attention to it. Usually I kind of say something like, so you're not allowing me this. So you are preventing me from this. And just wait for a response. And I don't do a whole lot of back and forth. So I think I just find another way. To at least that's what I'm hearing. I just find another way to just go and just make this work. More than likely I've survived without this person's approval, and I think I'm probably able to do that again. So that's about the best I can offer. Am I missing something? I don't want to rob Victoria of an answer. Okay. Can I just go ahead and answer the next question too? I see they're lining them up for me.
Go for it.
Yeah, does it matter if the woman is the breadwinner in the family instead of the man? That's a great question. And my wife is a physician. She's an anesthesiologist. She makes about 3 or 4 times more than what I make. She is clearly the breadwinner. And I can tell you, I want to make this point. I can tell you that what I do in my house, I don't necessarily think that that's going to work in everyone's house, but it works in mine and it works well. And I think part of what, if you're able to, you may want to have a unified agreement, unified front among the parents as to how you're going to manage, period. So my wife and I talked a long time ago about our finances, and we even make that a practice in how we distribute resources. We agreed that we're going to be one household, so there's one bank account, and we very quickly in our accounting and our budgeting, we realized, my little money is significant, even though she brings in bigger money. It's all significant and all has a purpose. And we made it clear that we were not going to talk down to one another just because the other person didn't bring home the majority of the resources. Either way, a lonely parent is still lonely. And if you pull rank that way, then whether you have all the money in the world or not, it's much easier to share when you have a partner. And I think that's what we have to ask ourselves. Do we want partners? Do we want to be in this together? There have been times when people have said, I don't need you. And the response is, okay, well, keep trying to do this by yourself and see how that goes. Do you want to take on a position that says, I need partnership? We need to work together. And I think that's helped us. Well, I know it has. I don't think it has. That's helped us tremendously. So the big thing was we had a conversation. We had several conversations about, what do you need from me? How do I make sure I don't embarrass you? How do I make sure that we are still seen as contributors to this space, and that was before we had kids.
Mm.
I think I'll go on to say too, one of the times where I had to advocate for my position as a parent was when I told my wife and my family, I'm just as much of a parent as everyone else. And I've been a parent to these two girls just as long as my wife has been. So although she may have the more prestigious, she may be the more prestigious doctor, we're just as experienced in being a parent as the other person.
Okay. But that takes a lot of maturity. I think someone mentioned that, to be able to have that level of conversation and to be able to say, okay, what does this mean? And does that mean you automatically go to the mom? Yeah, so that's the assumption that even within the family, like you said, is that the assumption is that the person to ask about anything is the mom. Sometimes it is. Like, I've been interviewing dads and they didn't know the name of the teacher. They didn't know even the grade the kids were in. But then there are some dads who are 100%, they're the primary go-to person. And so instead of making the assumption, you can ask that question, who should I ask, or who's the person? Because sometimes it is the dad. The dad is the person in that family. And we shouldn't make the assumption that it's the mother, and that it should be the mother.
And I would go so far as to say the converse is true too. I could be a stay-at-home father. It's just what's our partnership?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, absolutely. I'm just agreeing with you 100%. Okay, so it looks like we probably do have time for the poll. So let me go ahead and share my screen again. Oh, is the poll already up? Yeah, it's already been launched. Okay, so there's a poll that we have here. Let me go. And people are starting to answer. It looks good. Question is, how do you think stereotypes impact Black men's involvement in the lives of children? We've already talked about that to some extent. But wow, okay. You guys are firing right away. 24, 27%, or 27 of you have already answered. Oh, moving along. Okay, overwhelming majority is it Black men and fathers experience physical and psychological distress as a result of stereotypes about them. Absolutely. Okay. As people continue to weigh in, I'm going to move us along. We do have a training that's available on our training site on Black fathers. It was part 1. It's what was conducted last year. We had Dr. Kent Butler with us and Dr. Zola Ahwama Jonas, who were our guest panelists last year. It is available now for free on our training site. So if you go to the link that I believe our graduate research assistant, Kimberly Bowe, is putting that in the chat. You can access that if you want to get more training on Black fathers about these important issues. Feel free to do that. We want to remind you to go ahead and complete the post-webinar survey. We truly value your opinion. We compile all the recommendations for future topics. In fact, this topic was one that was recommended. We want to know the impact that this training has had on you and your practices in terms of what you do personally and professionally. We'll remind you, of course, that we have the in-person training, which is the Emancipatory Research Symposium in New Orleans at Xavier University, upcoming on July 12th. We want to remind you that, of course, we're not going to be having any webinars in July or August. We're taking a little bit of a break, but we'll start back up again in September, and you can go ahead and save those dates. We'd love to have you with us. And we'd like to remind you again to connect with us on social media. We actually have about 10 more minutes, so Dr. Brooks will yield to you if there's anything you'd like to say, anything that we didn't ask you about, or anything that's come to mind as we've been talking. And the same thing for everyone, our other panelists as well. Anything that you'd like to add before we close things out?
I would only add that or reiterate that There are fantastic, phenomenal Black fathers that are everywhere and prevalent. And Black people, specifically Black fathers, are not a one-size-fits-all entity. And thank you for the opportunity to share with CREST and the CREST team.
Well, we consider you a member of our team, maybe unofficially. We're just so happy that you are willing to lend your expertise and to share your professional and personal experiences related to this topic. I think it's been very useful to us as always. And for those of you who have enjoyed what Dr. Brooks has had to say and benefited from that, keep in mind that Dr. Brooks has a concept paper that will be posted to our website soon, along with Dr. Ebony White also has a concept paper. I saw people were very, had a lot to say about Dr. White's comments. And so if you enjoyed those today, you are in for a treat in general. Dr. White will be definitely more involved. She'll have a webinar that she'll have responsibility for in the fall. And she has a concept paper that has been completed that will be on our website soon. And I believe Kimberly Bowe will be interviewing Dr. White and I think Dr. Brooks about their concept papers. And so you'll get a chance to see her interviewing skills and to get a chance to hear directly from Dr. Brooks and Dr. White what their motivation was in terms of selecting their topics for their concept papers and to expound on some of the points that they made in their papers. And it's always one of those things that what I love when you talk to the author of a paper is that after they've written a paper, sometimes what happens is they grow and develop and say, you know, I said this, but I just saw a brand new study that came out, or maybe they've amended some of their opinions based upon things that have happened since the time the paper was completed. And so, or just didn't get a chance to say everything. You can't say everything in a paper. So you get a chance to really dig their, dig into their brain when you hear like, what are they really thinking and feeling, and what was their motivation, and where are they going in the future. So keep posted, and we'll keep you posted about everything. Keep connected with us, ideally through social media. We're going to do a quick blast when we have these concept papers ready and when the interviews are ready. So we want to make sure that you know when there's more coming from them. And actually, Kimberly Bowe will have a concept paper further down the pipeline, but we're moving along. Of course, Dr. West-Olatunji has one, and we have several concept papers already on our website. So feel free to check out our website. And of course, the training that we did last year this time with Drs. Butler and Ahwama Jonas on Black fathers. So this is really a part 2. And as a reminder, you'll have access to the video recording of today's webinar. You'll get an email message that includes the link. So feel free to revisit it if you didn't catch the whole thing, or if there are things that were said you want to see again. Feel free to watch it again, and you'll be able to access it for free for 14 days. And then you will still have access to the last year's webinar if you want to go onto our training site. Okay, well, this is one of those things. It's like our time together today is coming to an end. Anything that you haven't said, that you feel the need, desire, Spirit says, hey, I got to say this before we go. This is your chance. So feel free, anyone on the panel, if there's anything else you'd like to say, this is your opportunity. Dr. Brooks is saying he's good. We've said a lot for us to think about and to consider and think about, how we want to follow up on that to make sure we implement what we've learned. Dr. White, anything else? She's like, no, I've dropped enough pearls of wisdom for the day. Okay, and Kimberly, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you all so much for being here. The Father's Day webinar is always one of the best ones.
Absolutely. And again, thank you to all of you who registered, who shared the link with your colleagues. For those groups, I can see there's some groups that's like the entire team or the majority of the team registered for this training. So we thank you for making it something that not only you wanted to experience, but that you encouraged your colleagues and counterparts to also participate in. So we thank you. We welcome all of you back if you're returning, and if it's your first time, we thank you for being here, and we welcome you to the CREST family.